Before I read my standard statement, let me tell you that we have a pretty thick agenda today. We have 3 cases before we get to the 910 Madison case. I'm going to guess that the first part could take an hour. It could be a little under, it could be a little over. If you don't want to sit here to watch the other cases, that's fine. And if you come back within 45 minutes to an hour, I think it'd be fine. If you are staying here, I'd appreciate if you would respect the cases. Not that I don't expect that. So with that, the first order of business is to approve the minutes from the August 4th, 2022 minutes. Is there a motion to approve?
I'll make the motion to approve.
Second.
Second.
Is there any discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
I don't hear any opposition.
I'm abstaining because I wasn't at the meeting.
Okay, but we have our 5 votes. Okay, next one is to adopt the minutes from the August 25th, 2022 meeting. Is there a motion to approve on that?
So moved.
Second. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Would somebody please second the, yes.
I'll second.
We don't want to spend a lot of time on this. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Abstain.
You abstain because you weren't there.
And I'm
Okay.
abstaining because I wasn't there.
So we still have all 4 votes. I realize that I have not read the statement yet, so I'm going to stop that and say, no, I'm not. I'm going to keep going. Adoption of the August 25th resolutions, V1601M2, V2211, V2212, V2213. Is there a motion to approve those resolutions?
So moved.
Second?
I'll second.
Okay, all those in favor, any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Abstain.
You're abstaining, okay. That was the meeting you were at. Okay, that's approved. Adoption of the September 15th, 2022 minutes. Is there a motion to approve those minutes?
Yes.
I'll take Karen's motion and your
second.
second. Okay. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, we're unanimous. Adoption of the September 15th, 2022 resolutions V2215, V2217. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All those in favor of adopting the resolution say aye.
Aye.
Okay, we got through that.
The September 15th meeting, Mike Stanton wasn't there.
I was not?
Okay, so just remove his vote and we still have,
Oh,
Yeah, 4.
you made the motion. We should start that
Made
again.
the motion.
okay, let's start again. Is there a motion to approve the September 15th resolutions?
I'll make the motion to approve.
Second.
Second, okay.
And the minutes as well.
And the minutes as well.
I'll make the motion to approve the minutes.
Okay. And we'll vote on them both?
Yes.
Okay, well, let's vote on the minutes. All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. And abstain. Okay, and now the resolutions. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Do we need to make a motion on that?
We did both.
Okay, very good.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Abstentions? Okay. Okay. The board will now conduct the public hearings on today's agenda. The way we work it here is that first, the applicant or the applicant's representative will state the reasons for the requested variance and present any material or documentation which is to be considered regarding the proposal. Next, persons wishing to speak in favor of the proposal will be given the opportunity to address the board. Then, persons who wish to speak in opposition will be allowed to address the board. Finally, the applicant or a representative will be given the option to make any closing arguments or comments to the board. Following the public hearings this afternoon, the board may make a decision on each application heard. The board may also decide to hold its decision until the next public hearing. If the hearing is closed, no additional information will be allowed into the record except for information that the board may request. That information will be available for public review at the zoning office in City Hall Commons. Staff will now introduce the first application.
The first hearing this afternoon is V-22-16. It's an area variance request to waive side yard and structural coverage at 305 Scott Home Terrace. Proposal is to construct a front entry porch, carport, mudroom, three-season room, and rear deck. The owner applicant is Adrian and Brian O'Quinn, and the zoning district is residential class A1.
The applicant or representative here. Please step up. Everybody who steps up to the podium today will first state their name and address clearly, and then say what you want to say.
How's it going? Brian O'Quinn, 305 Scott Home Terrace, Syracuse. Is that appropriate?
Yeah, that was good, thank you.
All right, lovely.
I'll review your case for us.
So as made reference, the project itself is to create a carport structure, a new front entranceway for our home, and some outdoor living space, a back deck, and a screened-in porch area. Ultimately, we're looking for assistance in that matter.
You're looking to add new space, additional space, you don't find you have enough space in the house?
So the two folds. Currently, our adjacent neighbors in our vicinity all have some sort of a structure to protect vehicles, safe entrance, things of that nature. So carports, garages, we do not. We do not have that in our current home. So we're looking to build that structure in order to have safe entrance into our home, snow, ice, etc. Along with that, it would change kind of the entrance into our home right now because our current entrance into our house on the side of the home is elevated. So having this new carport structure would force us to have a new entrance into our home and again, safe entrance into the house. And then for the back portion of the house, which is the deck project, our current deck is showing quite a bit of wear and tear, structural integrity could be in question in the near future here, so we're looking to expand on that project and ultimately create a room in the first floor of our house so that, you know, for future single level living, we could have that opportunity for us in the future.
It looks like there's room for just one car, is that going to be enough?
The current structure will be room for 2 cars.
The proposed structure will have room for 2 cars?
Yes.
Back to back, I mean.
Is that
end to
clear
end,
on the
or-
application?
Correct. In this direction, yep.
Is that right? I thought there was only room for a single car, am I wrong?
So you're suggesting that you can park in there, one and then one behind it?
Correct, in tandem, yep. They will fit.
There's
It's-
sufficient space for 2 legal parking spots there?
Yes, it's a 36-foot carport in length, 2 vehicles, about 15-foot range, plus a little bit of space in between for walking.
Okay.
Other questions?
They did submit a response to comments and updated plans. I handed out to you. They added a sidewalk to the plans as requested. And they spoke to Kate Atwaters, the Landmark Preservation Board comments.
They do not need a certificate of appropriateness, it's not a controlled district, is that right?
Correct.
Did you decide on making any changes as far as what the Preservation Board had recommended to you?
No changes, no.
Can you tell us about the stormwater runoff, that issue, how you're dealing with it?
Yeah, so the proposal that was in those questions, ultimately the drainage of that carport itself will drain, you know, from the back of the carport under and into our backyard. And we've updated our drawings to ultimately show that, so that no rainwater, et cetera, will move in that direction. We've also changed the elevations in the plan itself to show appropriate runoff for that structure.
Gutter to catch rain?
Yes, gutters, yep. And then the pipe itself will go down underground into the backyard.
Other questions from the board? Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Anybody who wishes to speak in favor of the application? Is there anybody who wishes to speak against the application? Hearing none, we will move on to the next case.
Thank you very much.
The next case is V-22-18, a use variance request to waive permitted uses at 239 to 41 and 243 West Ostrander Avenue. A request to expand a non-conforming two-family dwelling. The owner applicant is TKTD Inc. and the Greater Syracuse Property Development Corporation. Property is zoned residential Class A1.
Good afternoon, I'm Terry Luckett from the Syracuse Land Bank, 431 East Fayette Street. 239 West Ostrander is a two-story, two-family home. It was built in 1900. Ken Kinsey owns TKTD. He purchased the property from HUD in 2003. He renovated both units and has been operating it as a two-family ever since. The property is fully occupied. It's fully compliant with rental registry. Mr. Kinsey would like to acquire the vacant lot next door from the land bank. He wants to use it for off-street parking for 2 cars for his tenants and for additional yard space. A re-subdivision would be required to accommodate the parking use, and because it's in an RA1 zoning district, a use variance is required to expand that non-conforming use. I'd like to go through the standards of proof. Number 1, reasonable return. Mr. Kinsey would experience financial hardship if the variance were not granted and if he still wanted to pursue that re-subdivision. A search on Realtor.com this morning yielded 2 single-family homes for sale on West Ostrander. 228 West Ostrander is listed for $16,000. 605 West Ostrander is listed for $60,000. We provided a pro forma. I won't go through all the details of that in your packet. If these values in the neighborhood were any measure, Mr. Kinsey would never be able to recoup the investment he would need to make in the property to make it into a two-family, and the investment he's already made in the property. The investment he would need to make it a single family, and the investment he's already made to renovate a two-family unit. He'd never be able to recoup those costs. Number 2, unique circumstances. The property is unique amongst the other houses on the street because it contains 2,100 square feet. The 22 single-family homes on the street contain an average of 1,400, which is 48% less space. If he were forced to make the property a single family, that house would be outsized compared to its neighbors. It's also unique because it's located next to a vacant lot. Number 3, essential character of the neighborhood. The approval of the variance to expand the non-conforming use with additional yard space wouldn't change the essential character of the neighborhood. This house has existed as a two-family as far as the city knows, because of their records back to 1988 and probably back to 1900. The lot has always been vacant. I checked with codes and there's been no record of a demolition happening there. So absorbing this lot into Mr. Kinsey's lot would have no effect on the character. And number 4, self-created hardship. It was not Mr. Kinsey's fault that the owner of the vacant lot next door failed to pay his property taxes. With this use variance and the subsequent re-subdivision, Mr. Kinsey will take control of this abandoned piece of land. He'll pay taxes, he'll maintain the property, it'll increase the value of his home and consequently the values of the homes on the street. It's good for the neighborhood.
There's a mention of the sidewalk that needs to be replaced through the driveway in our notes. Will you be addressing that?
You mean the one that goes along the driveway?
The one that goes through the driveway. It's in the notes from the plan.
Yeah, he's gonna redo that driveway, so he when he gets his permit, they'll make him do that.
it's okay to make that a condition of the variance, that you
Yeah,
replace the
and
sidewalk?
actually, it's confusing whether or not the city's taking control of redoing the sidewalks and then building them into the property taxes. We're confused about that
Staff, you
at
want
the
to
land bank.
comment on that? I'm still confused, to
Yeah.
be honest.
I mean, I don't know if he would be required to do it or if the city would come along and do it and then bill him.
We've seen in other cases that the owner's been required.
I just, because of the new city sidewalk program, I would prefer not to put a condition on this variance that might need to come back to us to be limiting if in fact the city is gonna do it. It's required by the permit anyway, just procedurally.
Well, it's my understanding that when there's work that needs to be done on a sidewalk now, and the city doesn't have plans for a major construction project done through that new program, then the city, or the property owner is responsible.
That's what happened in a previous case. I don't remember exactly what case it was, but this came up, and no, the city was not going to do it.
I mean, you can
If-
have the city do it and then pay for it through your taxes.
Yeah, I thought that's what the new program is anyway. They're gonna bill it back to the property owner. But it's unclear to us.
That's always been available, but
Yeah.
the new program is just generating revenue to do a lot more sidewalk work in the city.
I guess my point is, if it's going to require a city permit that will require all of these conditions anyway, and we don't know either way for sure here, then let's not potentially put another revised application coming to us if we just don't know.
It sounds like we know, though.
I don't feel like I know I know that that's gonna go one way or the other.
I agree with Nora.
Thank you, Terry.
As long as it gets done somehow.
It has to go in the permit for the sidewalk construction, so
Okay, okay.
I feel confident that the permit department can handle it.
And I see that there's going to be room for maybe 2 cars in the way that it's...
That's what he'd like to do. When he redoes that driveway, he'd like to have 2 cars for one for each apartment.
I see. All right.
Other questions?
No?
So Terry, when you look at this house, it's the property, it's the empty lot on the
Right-hand side.
right?
That's a lot, right?
Yeah.
To the right of the house.
Is there another one there? I can't remember.
Looks like it's something that's designed.
But we're talking about the one on the right, yeah.
Other questions? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody wish to speak in favor of the application? Anybody wish to speak against the application? Hearing none, we'll go to our next case. I may have lied. We're breezing through pretty quickly.
The next case is V-21-21. This is a continuation of a public hearing. It's for an area variance to waive parking in the required front yard. The address is 105 McDonald Road. The proposal is to expand a driveway. The owner applicants are Tamara and David Danner. The zoning district is residential class A1.
Good afternoon. I'm Tamara Danner from 105 McDonald Road. When my husband and I purchased the house in 1999, there were 2 driveways. There was a driveway in the front yard, which runs along Rhineman Road, which led to a garage that the former owner had converted into a living space. He had built a garage on the back of the house, which runs along McDonald Road, and there was another driveway leading into that garage. That garage is a 2-car garage. So my husband and I were living in the house together using the driveway that went into the garage and not really using the driveway at the front of the house on the Rhineman Road side. We have a corner lot. Approximately 13 years ago, my retired mother came to live with us so that I could take care of her in her old age. She built an addition onto our house. We had to get a permit for that addition. I will say that part of my yard and my house reside in the city of Syracuse, and some of my yard resides in the town of Onondaga. I'm a dual citizen, if you will. But both my husband and I, as wartime veterans, we both get a pretty big tax break on our taxes, so it's not too bad. So when we applied for the permit, the city came out and made us remove the driveway in the front of the house. They said we couldn't have two driveways. We didn't really use that driveway anyway. We didn't see a problem. We figured we'd just make a walkway from the driveway in the back of the house, back side of the house, on McDonald Road, around to the front of the house, which is on Rhineman Road, to access the front door, but really we went in and out the garage. Well, my mother and I park in the garage, and my husband was parking in the driveway. After 2 times, my mother backing into my husband's car and damaging it, we decided that wasn't working, and the musical cars wasn't working. So we built a little parking pad off of Rhineman Road, just a little paver parking pad for my husband to put his car on, so that they wouldn't have to play musical cars and she wouldn't run into his car anymore. Well, the driveway now that runs off of McDonald Road into the garage, because the other driveway is no longer in existence, that is at the bottom of an extremely steep hill. The cars come tearing down that hill 40, 45 miles an hour. Whenever we try to come off of McDonald Road into the driveway, we have to slow down significantly to get into the driveway safely. We have almost been rear-ended, and or we have people lay on their horn because they don't understand that we're trying to maneuver off the road into the driveway, and they're coming down the hill so fast, and they just don't get it, even though we put our blinker on way up the hill at Rosemary Ave to let them know that we're going to be turning into the driveway soon. So when we decided that we needed to repair the driveway off of McDonald Road, I submitted a permit for that, and my survey with a drawing on it that wasn't to scale, and that permit was denied because I had added a little parking pad off the driveway, so my husband could actually, we could get rid of the parking pad at the front of the house, which isn't convenient for him at all, especially in the winter when it snows, and a little parking pad off of the driveway. The new driveway would have roughly the same dimensions as the old driveway, but there'd be this little parking pad off of the side of the driveway where he could pull into the driveway and just pull off to the side, and then my mom could back in and out of the garage without hitting him or playing musical cars, especially now that she's older. So there was a lot of back and forth about what I needed to reapply for the permit. I reapplied for it with a to-scale drawing. Then it was decided that my permit hadn't been updated, and there was new structures. There were some decks that I had received a permit for and built onto my house that weren't on my current survey, so I had to get a new survey, which took many, many, many months, because obviously there were a lot of people requesting surveys due to the housing boom. So anyway, in the meantime, I was denied the driveway because the driveway can only be so wide, and even though I have a double car garage, the driveway can only be the width of the garage door, and there can't be that little parking pad off the side, apparently, for my husband to pull over so that my mom doesn't hit his car or they have to play musical cars, which they're doing, they would do now more than ever since he's actually working from home. So I'm asking to, my property is very large. Again, it's a corner property, and I'm asking to be able to build a new driveway with a little parking area for my husband to pull over. Then we can get rid of the parking pad in the front of the house. I will tell you that there is no on-street parking in the front of the house. I have pictures if you'd like to see. On my side of the road, in the front of my house on Rhineman, there is a sign that says, this is in the front of my house, no parking from 2 a.m. to 8 a.m. November 1st to March 31st. That's in the front of my house, so my husband can't park on the road in front of the house. On the other side of Rhineman is a sign that says no parking anytime. So he can't park in front of our neighbor across the street's house at any time because there's no parking. And that extremely busy hill that we live on, McDonald Road, has no area on the side of it, which is on the, where my driveway is, my driveway side, to park a car. There's just this little tiny strip of maybe 3 feet, if that, and the way those cars come down the hill, he wouldn't have a car for very long. So I'm not really in the Stradmore neighborhood. I'm not really in the neighborhood at all. I'm at the back entrance of Corcoran High School. And I walk my dogs in the Stradmore neighborhood twice a day, every day, 3 miles each time. And we walk on this little road called Carlton. It's only maybe 3 blocks. And as I'm walking there, I'm noticing that most of the residents have ginormous driveways. I mean, this is the best one. This is the fun one. I mean, huge, enough for semi-tractor trailers. And I'm not understanding why I'm being denied a permit for a little parking pad off the side of my driveway that it's not I have a fence between my neighbor's house and my house. It's not even that going to be that close to the fence, so that my husband can pull over, so that my mother can get out of the garage when she needs to get out of the garage without having him have to stop what he's doing, which is work from home, to move his vehicle or accidentally back into it because she forgets that he's there.
I have a question of staff. Nothing that Ms. Tanner is talking about here is out of the city, you know, because our property is on both sides. This is all, I just want to make sure this is all city property. Yeah. What about those pictures you showed us? Is that all city of Syracuse as well?
Yes, the little road that's right around the corner from my house called Carlton is all in the city of Syracuse. And that's just that road. I mean, Twin Hills, I walk down Twin Hills. I mean, this gentleman literally has a whole basketball court in asphalt off of his driveway on the corner of Twin Hills, right down the street from the park there, the Onondaga Park. And, I also wanted to say that the driveway width, I think, is an issue too, because even now it's a little over the width that it should be. It's not the width of the garage door, but it's very hard to pull in off of that big hill into the driveway without almost coming to a complete stop and running the risk of being rear-ended. So I did ask for a dimension similar to what it is now. And I did get my new survey, which cost quite a bit of money, finally. And no, none of that property is in the town. The town property actually runs partway down Rhineman Road, but on my property. And then all the houses on Rhineman Road, except for 2, are in the town of Onondaga. The last house before you get to Corcoran High School that belongs to a good neighbor friend of mine, her house is actually, her whole entire property and house is in the city because the man, Rhineman, who gave the property to build Corcoran High School on, demanded that he be considered in the city because it was an asset back then because of city services to be in the city. So her property is all in the city. The rest of the road is all town except for my property, 105, which is half town, well, 3/4 city, quarter town, and my neighbor across the street, a retired city firefighter who also has the same situation. He's part city, part town, and then the neighbor directly next to me, which is where my driveway is, he's in the same situation as I am, where a lot of his property is in the city, but his backyard is in the town. And then also the 2 houses up from me are in the same situation where they were all dual citizens. But the rest of the road, Rhineman Road, which is where the front of my house is all town. So it's a very bizarre situation. And when I try to get city services at my house, like brush clearing on the road there, because there's like a wildlife refuge across from my house and stuff. There's always an argument about whether or not it's city or town property.
Thanks. Questions from the board?
May I see those pictures?
Yes, sir. Which ones? The ones of the street signs or the ones of the
The
people's,
last series that you showed, that,
all the driveways on Carlton? That-
Yes.
Did I just,
in my packet.
They start on page 92.
Yeah.
So-
That's actually more in the Strathmore neighborhood than I am. I'm not really considered Strathmore. Really, Carlton really isn't either, but not Strathmore proper, but they do call that area Strathmore.
Other questions from the board?
So there used to be 2 driveways. You're not asking to have 2 driveways again.
No, and I'd
Just the
like to
one.
get rid of the little parking pad in the front too, because it looks silly and it's not convenient for him. We've also had a lot of car break-ins in the area, and my husband wanted his car closer up toward the house, and our bedroom is right there near the driveway, and he somehow feels that that'll be, he locks his car, so I think he's pretty safe. But our next-door neighbor has had their car burgled and also some items stolen out of their house when they were on vacation. So he just feels
That's happening all over.
it's awful. I work in the crime lab. I work for Onondaga County. I work in the crime lab, and it's really bad.
Other questions?
Have you tried having your mother park behind you, or does that not make a difference?
Well, no, if my husband parks behind me, if I park in the garage and he parks behind me or on my side, she still manages to meet. That was the second time she managed to kind of back out diagonally and hit him too. And I think it's only going to get worse. She's suffering from cataracts right now. She has her surgery scheduled, but with the pandemic, it kept being put off. So I'm hoping if she sees better, it will help.
She will. I've done it. It's fantastic. Other questions? Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Do I
Anybody?
wait or do I leave now?
That's up to you.
Oh, I'll wait.
Okay, that's up to you.
This has been a long time.
Anybody wish to speak in favor of the application? Anybody wish to speak against the application? Hearing none, we are moving to,
There is a new business item.
Yeah.
I don't know if you want to address that first.
yes, we'll get that out of the way. This is the Genesee Street, many different addresses, and it's a discussion on giving the planning commission, correct?
Yes.
Lead agency status on this, and just explain, so we're just gonna discuss, or we're gonna take a vote endorsing the lead agency status?
Right, I wanted just a brief overview of the project. It's a multi-family dwelling, apartment building, and it's going to require project site review, a re-subdivision, which are reviewed by the planning commission, and also area variance, which would be reviewed by the BZA.
I read what you sent us.
So the planning commission will hold public hearings first on those, on re-subdivision and project site review. They will make comments to the BZA, will then come to the BZA for review of the area variance, and then it will go back to planning commission. And the question now is who serves as lead agency, and the suggestion is that the planning commission serve as lead agency rather than the BZA.
Any questions for our helpful staff people?
No, we're going to vote on this now before going forward with other matters today.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anybody have any questions, comments, or otherwise? Then I will entertain a motion.
I will make the motion.
I'll second.
You're making a motion
To approve the city planning commission as acting as lead agency for the residential project at many addresses on East Genesee Street.
Second.
any discussion? Right, it's the old Ronald McDonald House, the original one, right? Plus other properties, I guess. Okay, all those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Okay, we're done with that.
This is wrong, because we did these last time.
Other piles of paper. No.
There were some, public comments
Yeah.
submitted for us,
Yeah.
Scott Home, as you circle back to that.
Oh, on Scott Home.
Yes, should we vote on what we've heard so far today?
Yes.
Okay, then we'll do that, and,
We need to make a motion on that, Stu?
on what?
On, voting on what we heard thus far?
I don't think
We could
so.
just move ahead.
I can take my,
Looks like the deposit there, it looks, with the risk of, the information today on Scott Home, looks like they're in favor of the project, so, yeah.
okay, let's go to the cases. B 2216, 305 Scott Home Terrace, is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Is there a second?
I will second.
Okay, you're.
The standards, will there be a change in the neighborhood character? Very little, and what change there will be, I would think, will be positive. The new design looks like it'll be an improvement. Are there alternative solutions available so that a variance is not needed? It's a small scale variance being required here, and it sounds like the owner has addressed the potential problems with drainage, which is the main one. What's the magnitude of the variance being requested? It is minor. Will there be an adverse effect to the surrounding neighborhood if the variance is granted? I think there'll be an improvement to the surrounding neighborhood, and including those properties closest now to this property. Self-created difficulty, they're dealing with the issues of the house and the lot as it is, and I would not say it's a self-created difficulty.
Thank you, Mike. Anything else to add to that, Mr. Chair? Oh, wait, who seconded? You did.
Yeah, no, I agree with Mike's logic.
Okay, I'll call the question. All those in favor of the motion to approve the variance say aye.
Aye.
I see that as unanimous. Move on, B 2218, use variance, waive permitted uses, 239, 241, and 243 West Ostrander Avenue. Is there a
I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
This is the expansion of an existing non-conforming. I think the applicants made a good case that this always was a two-family house based on the size of it compared to other two families in the neighborhood. The applicant has made a good case that they cannot realize a reasonable return provided the lack of return. These are properties that are, it's a vacant lot, and I think this is the best outcome for that vacant lot, is to be combined to the property next door and to make it more economically viable by allowing more parking. The alleged hardship relating to the property in question is unique. It is unique in the sense that it's a vacant lot next door. The requested use variance, if granted, will not alter the essential character of the neighborhood. I think it'll be an improvement. It puts some improvements on the vacant lot, puts it into useful use. The alleged hardship is not self-created. The land bank is dealing with these properties as they are, and it is not a self-created hardship.
Mike, just a reminder, it's a use variance, and I didn't catch your seeker declaration for this one.
Negative declaration, thank you.
Thank you.
I'll agree, and I think when the lot is acquired, it will have to be maintained, which would be an improvement as well. No, this is.
Yeah.
Go for a nice sidewalk. Okay. any other comments? I'm gonna call the question. All those in favor of the motion to approve the variance, say aye.
Aye.
That's unanimous. V 2121 area variance, 105 McDonald Road. Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Jennings?
Will there be a change to the neighborhood's character? From my estimation and what I see, the answer is no. Are there alternative solutions available so that the variance is not needed? I don't see any alternative solutions. What is the magnitude of the variance being requested? I think it will create a safer environment for the homeowner. And will there be any adverse effects on the surrounding neighborhood if the variance is approved? In my humble opinion, the answer is no. And is this a self-created difficulty? The answer to that question is no, because it was there when she purchased the house.
I would only add that the magnitude of the variance is not great, in addition to everything Otis said, that the pad at the head of the driveway by the garage, rather than widening the entire driveway further, is a nice compromise.
Any other board member have something to
I'll
say?
be voting no. I don't like expanding. The city should not be expanding drive areas in the front yard.
Okay, all those in favor of approving the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Against?
No.
No. Well, it passes 4-2. Okay. So, we're all set. Okay. Made it in 45 minutes.
Nailed it.
Right on the money. Right on the money. I have some things I want to say, Lisa, but should we introduce the case first and then let me?
Was it regarding the case or?
Yeah, the procedure for this hearing.
Yeah, I can announce it
Okay.
starting the public hearing.
Yes.
Okay, the next case is V-21-07. It's an area variance request to waive required yards, maximum structural coverage and required density at 910 Madison Street. It's a partial demolition and new construction to establish 210 dwelling units with amenity space and parking for 210 vehicles. Property owned by the Society of Concord. The applicant is LMP Syracuse Property Owner LLC. The zoning is residential Class B.
Thank you.
Can we have Brody guide us here, or
About what?
about how we handle this?
I'm gonna talk about it first. He's welcome to.
Okay.
To add. I want this to be, an efficient hearing. I recall a, hearing long ago, and this has been a long time coming, that lasted 5 hours, and I think the information hasn't changed that much. We have the comments from the sides, opposing sides. I'm gonna ask the applicant to make their statement, and I'm gonna ask the applicant to address the variances. We do not need the biography of the Development Corporation. We've things that we've heard before. I want that to be, again, just an efficient way of delivering this. I'm gonna ask for, as I've done in the past, who approves, welcome to talk. Everybody is welcome to talk. What I am requiring is that your statements be 3 minutes or less. I'll make a bit of an exception if there is a legal, if there are lawyers for either side that want to talk, but not much more than that. I'd say maybe 6 minutes. I want this to be efficient. If somebody comes up and says something, it is not necessary for somebody to come up and say the same thing. Because we're not voting. It's like one side has 10 people and one side has 3 people. Just in the interest of this not being a marathon, okay? And as we've done before, you please, when you talk, come up, say your name clearly and your address, okay? Mr. Smith, you have something you want to say?
Sure. Just by way of background, I'll give you a little recitation of where you are procedurally at this for the benefit of the public as well. So my name is Brody Smith. I'm an attorney at Bond, Schoeneck & King. I represent the city, your board, with regards to this matter. So this application began back in 2021. There was a public hearing initially in connection with that application. The applicant appeared and gave the presentation at that time. As part of any application before this board, you're required to comply with the State Environmental Quality Review Act, SEQR. As part of that SEQR process, you evaluated the environmental assessment form and identified one potential impact that required further study. In connection with that determination by this board, the applicant was directed to prepare an environmental impact statement, which is a more careful study of a particular issue that the board identifies as being of concern. The applicant prepared a draft scope, which this board approved. The scope was finalized. A draft environmental impact statement was prepared. That EIS was then, people were then given the opportunity to comment on it. It was then finalized in something called an FEIS, a final environmental impact statement. So that final environmental impact statement included the draft EIS, which was information about historic and cultural resources, which was the one issue that the board identified of being worthy of additional study. And then the final included not just the study and the information from consultants and architects, et cetera, that the draft had, but included all the comments that had been provided by the public up to that point. And the applicant responded to those comments in the final EIS. That brings you up to date in terms of what's happened in terms of SEQR on this case. What will happen next, my recommendation is as follows. The public hearing, the board should be careful to listen to the statements from the public on both sides and to consider what they have to say in making your decision, both in terms of SEQR and in terms of the ultimate application for the variances. At the conclusion of the public hearing, the next things that the board will undertake will be the adoption of a SEQR finding statement. So we've completed the EIS process. The last step of it is to adopt a written finding statement about the board's reaction to that environmental impact statement, right? And then following the adoption of that written finding statement, the board will be in a position to actually vote on the 5 factors, which you know so well and apply with regards to area variances. So my recommendation is, and my expectation is that the board listen to what the public has to say at this meeting, but this meeting is not, the intention is not for you to vote now, is to listen to what they have to say, absorb it. You'll be presented with a proposed finding statement after the hearing is completed. You'll be given, a few weeks to react to that, to provide, potential edits to it or amendments to it, and then you'll come back to your next meeting and make a decision.
So, yes, we do not have the capacity today to absorb everything that's in that statement, so it's best.
No, and also this board, this public hearing, I think it's important for the public to know, was not really required by law. This public hearing was something the board asked for at the last meeting because you wanted to hear what the public had to say. So I think it's appropriate to listen to what they have to say and absorb it, and then you can come back and vote once you've done that at your next meeting.
Thank you. And Brody will be our timekeeper. He's
Yeah, so
volunteered
what I'll
to be
do
our
for
timekeeper.
time, I don't want to interrupt anybody, but I'll just set my timer. Once you start hearing beeps, your 3 minutes are up, but I'm not going to jump up and grab the mic out of your hand or anything.
He's tough. Okay, so is there someone representing?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a second. My name is Rich Andino. I'm an attorney with Costello, Cooney and Fearon in the city of Syracuse. I'm here today on behalf of the applicant LMP Syracuse property. As the chairman noted, we have been at this application for approximately 2 years now, or a year and a half anyway. At the previous public hearing, we fully addressed all of the criteria necessary for the area variances in this case. We submitted a legal letter on behalf of the client that addresses each of those legal criteria. We don't think it's necessary to kind of take up the board's time again today to address each of those. We do appreciate all the time that the board has taken over the last year and a half. If you have any questions, I'm here today to answer any questions. One of our project engineers, Brian Bouchard from CHA, is here as well. As the board knows, the variances that we are requesting relate to setbacks, density, and structural coverage. We believe we've proven our case and that we're entitled to those variances. We believe the benefit to the applicant outweighs any detriment to the neighborhood. And with that, we'll let you hear from the public. Thank you.
Well, any questions from the board?
Yeah. You had the draft environmental impact statement and now the final environmental impact statement. Between the two, there were comments, and you responded supposedly to the comments in the final. Can you summarize the difference between the draft and the final environmental impact statements and what changes there were?
So substantively, there weren't many changes between the draft environmental impact statement and the final. Essentially the final environmental impact statement incorporates the draft environmental impact statement and then also attaches all the comments from the public and then, our responses to those comments. So substantively, things didn't change. I believe that we addressed everything that needed to be addressed from an environmental standpoint. We responded to the comments. There were many comments in support of the environmental impact statement. The ones that were, had some, criticisms or some, comments in a negative regard. I think we fully addressed all of those, but substantively, it's a very similar document to the draft. I don't know, Brian, you had anything to?
Okay. Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is there anyone who wishes to speak in favor of the application?
Yes, I'm Rabbi David Katz, current rabbi at Temple Society of Concord. I think I come with a very important perspective. Yesterday,
Will you give us an address, please? We need that.
An address.
Yes. Where do you live?
Oh, I live in East Syracuse, 170 Summerhaven Drive South, East Syracuse.
Thank you.
Whatever the zip code is. Yesterday was our holiest day of the year. It was the Day of Atonement. Many people were there in the sanctuary. They saw a beautiful sanctuary, well kept, just lovely. What they didn't see was this. If they looked behind the curtains in the social hall, they would have seen streaks of water damage. If they had gone upstairs to the third floor, they would have seen classrooms with cement coming off them that no longer can be used. If they had been in the temple just a few weeks ago, there was a leak in the hallway in the office area. There had been leaks in my own office The temple building is not in good shape, nor is the parking lot in good shape. The question of whether there will be change in, whether there will be change or not, whether this new edifice will be built or not, the question of whether change will happen is not the issue. Change is happening. It's just happening slowly and out of sight is what's happening. The question here is whether there will be proactive change that will enhance the neighborhood, enhance the city, and allow the temple to thrive. Because little by little, it's going to get worse and worse. And then the board is going to be confronted with neighbors coming up and saying, this is an eyesore, because it will be. It will be bad. It's just going to happen little by little. Better to take an offer that will really enhance and be good for all the sides. How many times in life, I'll just say this, can one solution actually satisfy two opposing parties? In this case, it may be. It may very well be that granting this new building to happen will allow the beautiful sanctuary to remain as a National Historic Landmark and enhancing the city, and will take away the building, the part of the building that is actually falling apart, that I see every day. So I hope that the change is proactive, and I hope that it's positive. And I believe that if the new building is allowed to happen, then everybody will benefit.
My name is Joe Greenman. I'm a retired attorney. I live at 609 Kimry Moore in Fayetteville, but I've been an attorney and worked in the city of Syracuse. I still have an office in the city of Syracuse for 48 years. So I've been here quite a bit. I'm also a member of Temple Concord. This section of the city is full of a variety of residential and commercial buildings. Some are new, some are historical. Some are low-rise, some are mid-rise. Some are on busy streets and some are on quiet streets. The city land use plan calls for a high density and a mid-rise or higher in this area. University Avenue is a main corridor that lends itself to larger buildings. And this plan preserves the historic sanctuary, which could fall into disrepair and be gone if this project fails. This property, as Rabbi indicated, could end up being abandoned, and that would be the worst case scenario for everyone. The plan does not change the shadows in the neighborhood significantly. It should be noted that Sherbrooke is built on the common property line, and therefore they've sort of created their own self-inflicted consequences. The property will be marketed to students, but to others as well. And students run on a separate timeline, so I know people have raised the question, oh, there's going to be traffic and there's going to be cars going in and out, and that's not the nature of what the students do. First of all, they're going to walk to school. They're not going to drive from this location up to the campus. They run on a different timeline than the normal business people coming in for work, and so they're not going to be coming out. There won't be any rush hour traffic. The building has been reduced to 7 stories. It was a higher proposal initially. They reduced it to 7 stories above ground. The sanctuary is connected to the property and will be used primarily for study space and occasional social events. There is no retail space or food service in this property. And I think that, again, takes away some of the concerns that some of the neighboring residents had, that this is going to create all kinds of traffic and food and people driving up and delivery trucks. There are 210 parking spaces inside the garage at the basement level. And again, the main courtyard is surrounded by the building, and so it's going to be out of sight of the public and of the neighbors. I've been at this building, been a member of the temple for 48 years. I have seen beer bottles and food and garbage thrown from the apartments next door into our parking lot, which makes our place look horrible. This building will take care of that. This structure will avoid that, and there won't be that problem in the future, so it's going to improve the neighborhood. Since the initial hearings and everything, I know that the New York State Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation has provided a letter of resolution which approved the plan to demolish all but the sanctuary. And I think that takes care of some of the concerns that the building is going to be, that there was other historic factors on it. So this is going to give really an opportunity to preserve this historic sanctuary building. And the rabbi said, we were there for services yesterday, and it's an amazing structure, and it should be preserved. And I believe fully that the only way it is going to be preserved is if this project is allowed to go through and approved. I think I kept mine under 3 minutes. I have been asked to read a couple of statements, which I will do partially, and then I'll submit them. One is from Sally Cutler, who is unfortunately unable to come for medical reasons. And she points out that 3.5 years ago, before anyone heard of COVID, that Landmark Properties proposed to purchase this building, and they've maintained this intent for a long time. Why would they stay the course? Because they know that the project represents the long-term future of this neighborhood, a future that certainly is clear well to the city and Syracuse and to this board. It's a vibrant, forward-looking cities change constantly. Neighborhoods changed over time. In Syracuse, no one need to look further than Armory Square, to Route 81 project, to the Inner Harbor. These changes have all, hopefully, and most of them do, improve the neighborhood and the city. Recall that even the Madison Street, across the street from 910, the condominium building, was once an elementary school. They changed the whole purpose of that building, which created other issues with that area. But these all end to improve the city. And she believes that for the future, she urges you to approve these variances and move the project ahead. And with your permission, I will submit her letter as well. The second letter is from Sheldon Call. Sheldon is a non-agrarian and is unable to attend the meeting in person. He asked if I read, I'm not going to read the whole letter, but I will touch a few points and then I'll submit this letter as well. He believes that this project is a win-win for the city of Syracuse, for the Temple, Concord, and for Syracuse and the Central New York Jewish community. He points out it's going to substantially increase the tax assessment for the city. It's going to be new construction in a changing area, not in a stagnant area. It's going to provide better housing for Syracuse University, its students, employees, and the medical personnel in the neighborhood. He points out again the ability to rehabilitate and maintain the structure. With those additions, I will submit his. His letter goes a little further, but I think there are things that have already been said, and so I will submit his letter as well. And the last letter that I will submit, and I'm not going to really read from because it's an overall letter and it's been done before, is from the Temple president, Jeffrey Lefkowitz, who unfortunately had a funeral he needed to attend out of state and wasn't able to appear and speak. He believes, and I'll just read the last line, all of Central New York will benefit as the area will be seen as a good place to do business, where respect for history is maintained and incorporated into critical development for the future of the community. And with that, I'll submit his letter as well. And again, I ask that you please consider this favorably. Thank you very much.
Anybody else wish to speak? In favor, yes.
I'll be very brief. Aaron Spitzer, 112 Sunnyside Park Road, Syracuse.
Put the mic.
Sorry. Now can you hear me? Okay. Just to, I think Joe hit most of the main points. Basically, the historic nature of the sanctuary will be preserved in this plan, and the developer has, I think, addressed all of the concerns that have been brought forth to this point. And the addition of this property to the tax rolls will significantly benefit the city as a whole. And as a Syracuse resident for the last 20 years, and a member of Temple Concord for the last 11 years. I strongly encourage you to vote favorably for this project. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to speak in favor?
You said in favor.
In favor.
Okay, okay. Yeah, you're good. All right.
My name is John Selzer. I live in Manlius, New York. The address is 134 Stanwood Lane, previously a long-term resident in the city of Syracuse. I speak as a long-term member of Temple Concord, a former member of the board, former treasurer, and former vice president. I don't know if this board has all the history, and I apologize for my ignorance in that space. But the congregation just 20-plus years ago had a membership of 725 families, or 65 families, excuse me. Today, we're hovering around 300, 100 families left within the last 3 years of COVID. We're an institution that has an endowment that is getting invaded regularly to sustain salaries and electricity and phones and the services that we need to provide on an ongoing basis. I think the history of the temple is important, going back to the sisterhood making blankets for Union soldiers, or us playing a critical role in civil rights advocacy in the 60s, or being the only Jewish congregation in the community having a open service of healing after 9/11, or serving 150 families a week, every single week out of our food pantry. I think our history matters. I'm not a lawyer, I'm not an architect, I'm not an engineer. I don't live on the block, I don't live in the city anymore, but the synagogue and I have a passionate relationship with one another. My wife would be here today, but she's terminally ill at home, and she has allowed me to speak on her behalf as well. The preservation of the building and the protection of the historic context of the building is important. And as my understanding is, our understanding is that the developer will honor that integrity. My concern is if this board doesn't approve this project, or if this community doesn't approve the project, or the city of Syracuse doesn't approve this project, Temple Society of Concord will be extinct in 15 years. I have written prepared statements, and I think 7 times I say that it's the 9th oldest Jewish congregation in the United States of America. This board, each one of you in this room, will make a decision about whether or not we have a future. I can find it unimaginable in my mind that Temple Concord won't exist in 15 years. I implore you to honor what the attorney talked about: history, culture, and the opportunity of the august group that's here to make a decision in support of this project at every corner, or say goodbye to Temple Concord. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Someone else speaking in favor?
Can I just submit these?
Sure. They'll send us a copy.
Good afternoon, Chairman, Board. My name is Jim Brewer. I live at 7106 Braxton Circle, Fayetteville, New York. Associated with Huber Brewer Construction Company for, hard to say now, approaching 50 years. We're at 148 Berwyn Avenue in Syracuse. We've been building and developing within the area for 150 years. We're celebrating our anniversary this year. I'm also a past board member for the Downtown Committee, and it was its chair for 10 years. I mention that as I relate to the points that I want to bring forth here. I believe Mr. Langen's variance letter and application thoroughly addresses the issue that would provide the ZBA with all the reasons to grant the requested variances. But separately, I wanted, with my background as a community board member and as a builder and developer, to offer some other perspectives. First, the connective corridor. At the time the connective corridor was conceived and built, I was both a trustee of Syracuse University and chair of the Downtown Committee. Why did this take place? It was really very, very simple terms. We wanted to connect the university area to the downtown area, and we wanted to turn an area plagued with abandoned buildings and urban decay into a thriving neighborhood. I ask you to look around. What has been accomplished since the connective corridor was established? Hundreds of millions of dollars of development has taken place. There were a lot of skeptics at the time, but this outcome is very visible and been extremely successful. To me, the Madison Street project is just another example of meeting the original vision of the corridor that has been so successful. I believe we should stay with that vision. Additionally, and unfortunately, our city is plagued with multiple former houses of worship that have fallen into disrepair. Buildings like the Mitzvah Tower, originally constructed as the First Baptist Church in 1910, it's really been abandoned since 1988. There's been multiple proposals to redevelop the building over the years, but today the building is still not utilized and is continuing to deteriorate. If I was here a year and a half ago, I'd say look at 711 East Fayette Street, formerly the People's AME Zion Church, built in 1910, was probably one of the most important African-American religious sites in Syracuse. And a year and a half ago, if you asked me, I thought it was headed for a wrecking ball. Fortunately, with public money, a lot of effort, and private donations, it's a thriving building today. But it was very difficult to get there, and it stood in a very deteriorated state for in excess of 25 years. If you look at 728 East Genesee Street, built in 1923 as the first Church of Christ Scientist, basically underutilized or vacant over the last 20 years. Multiple attempts to adapt and reuse. Some are under consideration now. Our fingers will remain crossed that maybe something will happen soon. But why are these buildings in that condition? Why have they been vacant? Why are they deteriorating? From a contractor standpoint of view, it's because of the method they were built, and the spaces within them that make it very difficult to reuse them. With the 910 Madison Street project, you have a developer who's not only willing to save this architectural and cultural historic site, but additionally is being very sensitive to its use and honor its past. This opportunity should be wholeheartedly and immediately embraced. And lastly, I've heard the project will have negative effect on adjoining property values. To me, and to all of us, a rising tide lifts all ships. This proposed development is very similar to the recent Lee construction, and to address this complaint, look no further than recent property sales in the area. Never have properties sold for higher prices. Thank you for your consideration.
Anybody else wish to speak in favor of the application? Hearing none, is there anybody here who wishes to speak against the application?
Good afternoon. My name is Robert Frank. I'm at 614 South Krause Ave. I'm a principal in the Sherbrooke Apartments. We own the property directly adjacent to the proposed project. You'll hear from both sides today, members of the board. The fact that there's impassioned opposition should send a red flag up about this project. I understand that there are several Madison Court residents who couldn't be here today. I'm not going to pretend to read their statements, but they have been submitted. I think the project fails on all 5 criteria for a variance to be approved, and you'll hear from other experts on that. The project's just too big and will harm our neighborhood. The massing and scale are inappropriate. Your own Landmark Preservation Board has expressed reservations about that. Your mission is to uphold the current zoning regulations in the city and protect the citizens from just this type of project. It's just the wrong project in the wrong place. The developer has not addressed any of our concerns. He tells you that he needs a project of this magnitude for it to be financially feasible. Well, that's what happens when you overpay for the land and try to develop a difficult site. The developer is not vested in Syracuse as we are. I understand the purchase offer is contingent on the project being approved, and if it's rejected, the developer can walk away with no further obligation. You've heard Temple Concord members tell you that the project is essential for them to be able to continue. Their goal is to cash in and move on. Once the check clears, I don't think they'll care too much about Madison Street. I have my own opinion about being rewarded for neglecting your own property. I'm not going to really go into that now. Temple Concord sits on a valuable piece of property. This is not their only opportunity to save their congregation. I wish them the best of luck, and make no mistake, if you reject this applicant's variance proposal, you'll have another one in front of you in 6 months. It's a valuable piece of property, and others will move to develop it. Hopefully, a future proposal might be a little more respectful of the surroundings and the neighborhood, and Temple Concord can eventually get the money that it needs to move on, and we can all live happily ever after. Haste makes waste, and I believe this is not a project that will benefit the city. I believe it's not a project that will benefit the neighborhood, and I don't think they've been considerate of our needs. I urge you to not approve it. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Judy Lieblein, and I'm one of the condominium owners across the street. No one in this room questions the urgency and the need to save Temple Concord. That is a given. But what is in front of us today is purely the developer's variance requests. These decisions to be made by the BZA are about the 5 variance requests that, to summarize, specifically relate to the size, density, and height of the proposed building, its proximity to the curb, its proximity to the Sherbrooke apartment building, the nature and character alteration that this building would cause to this historic neighborhood, and whether the alleged difficulty to the developer was self-created. Let's take this last one first. Of course, LMP, a Georgia-based developer, knew the nature of the project they were undertaking. LMP is a massively large developer of student housing. According to their website, they are, quote, the nation's top developer of student housing, comma, 5 years running, end quote, operating across 26 states. Do you think a developer of this scale doesn't know the zoning requirements of the properties they are purchasing? Of course they did. They have no ground to stand on in claiming that their difficulty is not self-created. LMP knew what they were getting into. The variances that pertain to the proposed population density, the building size, the building height, the building's closeness to the curb, the building's proposed mere 10 feet distance to the Sherbrooke, and the alteration of the nature and character of an historically registered neighborhood. All these variance issues are no-brainers to everyone in this room who has ever stepped foot on this block of Madison Street. A 7-story building is way out of proportion in size for this block. It is preposterous and unsafe to propose that 600 students and their additional 210 cars could live and function on this tiny 2-lane, 1-block street. And to this would be added the exponentially large number of daily Amazon deliveries, Uber rides, and let's not forget about restaurant and food deliveries for those 600 students. It is not even a question that the historic nature of this block, containing 4, and I repeat, 4 historically registered buildings, will be irreparably changed for the worse should this project be built. I would ask you to think of another small block in this city that has so many historic buildings within such a small space. There is not another. This is all the more reason for the BZA to deny the variances. It is your job as our BZA to uphold that which maintains the character of our neighborhoods, and in this case, not allow an outside developer to move forward with a project that would unquestionably destroy that character. If you were to stand on Madison Street and picture this enormous 7-story building wrapped around the current Temple building, it would be common sense to you that the character density and traffic flow of this historic street would be detrimentally altered, and that the people who currently call this block home will be negatively impacted. I'm sorry, there's very few of us, I'll hurry. Common sense. So why then, with this proposed project making such little sense, has the BZA's review process been so lacking in consideration of our concerns? In every step of this process, as it came before the BZA, we have witnessed the biased behavior of the chairperson, Mr. Koenig. At every stage and public meeting in this process, he has exhibited pro-project, pro-developer behavior and influence over his fellow board members.
Ms. Lubla, I'm going to stop you there. I'm not going to ask you to explain yourself, because I've heard this over and over again. What I'm going to say to you, you have no idea that there has not been 1 second of discussion with my board members about this case. Not 1 second. You keep saying that is absolutely false, and I just wanted to let you know that. Now, please wrap up your remarks.
And can I say this, Stu, in your defense?
No, I'd rather you not. Okay. I'd rather you not. Just please finish up, and let's move on.
Temple Concord has to and will be saved. Within the time that has passed since this project was proposed, there are ever more avenues to pursue in order to accomplish this. Everyone in this room, myself included, wants Temple Concord to be restored and have a new purpose and life. The issue at hand is that it is the BZA's job to protect Syracuse neighborhood, not destroy them. And by granting these variances and allowing this building to be built, the character and feeling of this neighborhood will be irrevocably destroyed. As a resident of this block, I should not have to be on the defensive by saying, please don't destroy my neighborhood. You, the BZA, should be telling this Georgia-based developer, not on this block and not on our watch. I'm sorry if I insulted you. I would be happy to explain the cases in which we have witnessed this behavior.
Let's go on to our next speaker, please.
Okay, thank you.
Can I still cannot comment?
No. When we have a discussion later, you can say what you want on this, but we're here to hear from the public, okay? Anybody else wish to speak against the application?
My name is Lisa Fershing, and I live in Clinton, New York, and we own a property at Madison Court Condos. We purchased the
What's the address there, please?
33 Fountain Street in 116, Unit 116, okay. Madison Court. We purchased this unit a year and a half ago when my son got into medical school at Upstate, and we were looking for a place for him to live that would be quiet and would be different for him to study, to inspire him, to give him a relaxing place to be. And Madison Court Condos was quite magical. We sat there and the streets were beautiful outside. It was quiet. It seemed like an oasis in the middle of a big city, and it appealed to us, and we purchased it. You were asking, I know very little about this whole procedure. I've just listened to what you said today. One of the things, does it affect the character of the neighborhood? Yes, a 7-story building dwarfing these other residences, you can't say it doesn't affect the character of the neighborhood. It does. Putting 600 students in that small print in 7 floors, it affects it. The second one is, does it adversely affect the other people who own property around it? And I feel yes, it does. And this may seem trite, but parking is a bad situation in that area. We end up talking to my son. He calls when he goes out to move his car because there's not even parking situation on there. Used to be, well, now it's like 20 minutes, and he has to go out and he has to find a new parking place for another car. We benefit because we get to talk to him for the 20 minutes, but I can't imagine what it's going to be like when there are 400 more people trying to park on that little area. And I believe it does affect us adversely. And I also know that they had a medical emergency in his building at 3 a.m. A parent got the call they never want from their child. We said it was a carbon monoxide alarm going off. We said call 911. Luckily, 3 a.m., the fire trucks could get through. They were able to park outside the gate of Madison Court and get in. I wonder if it were 5 o'clock, if they would have been able to get there in that length of time. It's a very congested area now. I went there to pick him up. I go to have lunch with him, and I pick him up and we go elsewhere because I can't find a parking spot to park to go in for a short-term visit at his place. So that's an inconvenience, but it also could be a safety issue. I pulled up and there was like a rentable scooter in the road and a big truck with the backup, and they were unloading things. The roads are constantly filled with stuff. I can't imagine what it will be like for both convenience and for safety. And again, the character of the neighborhood, I think it will change. Thank you.
Anybody else wish to speak against the application?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Douglas H. Zamalis, counsel for Sherbick, Inc., 7629 State Highway 80, Cooperstown, New York. And I am counsel, Mr. Chairman. My remarks are prepared. I do not ramble. I would request a waiver of the 3-minute time limit.
Okay, as quick as you can, please.
Of course, Mr. Chairman. The Sherbick is a protected site under the city zoning ordinance, and it's also a listed National and State Register place. My client would be uniquely affected because LMP wants to put its building only 10 feet from our shared property boundary instead of the 75 feet that the zoning law requires. LMP also wants your permission to ignore the side yard density and lot coverage requirements. And when a project needs that many large variances, it means it's too big for the site. With respect to the SECRA review, the Board of Zoning Appeals was absolutely right to issue a positive declaration here because this project does pose potentially significant adverse effects on the environment. But so far, it's been an empty and toothless paper exercise. As Mr. Smith mentioned, to conclude the process, you're going to have to make formal SECRA findings. And to do that, you're going to have to, quote, certify. You're going to have to certify that consistent with social, economic, and other essential considerations from among the reasonable alternatives available, this action is the one that avoids or minimizes adverse environmental impacts to the maximum extent practicable. And I want to emphasize that SECRA requires this legal certification of the board, and nothing else that you normally do requires a legal certification. And in order to make those findings, each of you needs to be convinced that this 7-story project that needs 4 large variances is the one that avoids or minimizes adverse impacts to the maximum extent practicable. How could you find that? The only way you could do that is to cover your ears, cover your eyes, plug your ears, and hold your nose. That's not your civic duty. You were appointed to exercise your independent and reasonable judgment and make rational decisions. And now is the time for the rest of you to exercise your independent and reasonable judgment. And ask yourself, does this project really avoid or minimize impacts to the maximum extent practicable? It's like Rainier's children. We all know it doesn't. So why would you legally certify that it does? And Mr. Smith neglected to explain that SECRA allows you to impose mitigation measures so that you can actually make a reasonable certification at the end of the review process. But so far, neither this board nor its professional staff have made a single comment or raised a single question about the EIS, about the DEIS or the FEIS. And when I taught law up at the law school, when my students didn't ask a single question or make a single comment, it meant they didn't get it. And when it comes time to make that legal certification, LMP has before you is the one that minimizes impacts to the maximum extent practicable. If you can't do it, don't. Ask some questions, make some comments, and impose some mitigation that would mitigate these acknowledged impacts. And you may not have a lot of experience with SECRA. I understand that. But the area variance balancing test and criteria are old hat to all of us. And if you exercise your reasonable and independent judgment, you have to see that LMP isn't entitled to all of these variances. It's not a popularity contest. There's a state law that prescribes this balancing test and the criteria. It's General City Law 81B. And please make no mistake, the burden is on LMP to demonstrate that it's entitled to the variances, not on the neighbors to show that they're not. And the law says you must balance the benefit to the applicant against the detriment to the health, safety, and welfare of the neighborhood. And who's the applicant here? You heard staff say it at the beginning. The staff is LMP Property Owner Syracuse, LLC. It's not Temple Concord. We all feel for Temple Concord, but if you were thinking that unloading this albatross would be a great benefit to Temple Concord, banish the thought. That's not part of the legal equation. The benefit is to LMP. So the benefit that LMP is seeking here is to cram the largest building it can on this small lot smack dab in the middle of a historic neighborhood. So don't think that preserving the sanctuary is a benefit to LMP. They'd rather demolish it and start from scratch. Now, the rear yard variance, 75 feet down to 10 feet, would certainly affect my client more than the density variance. So please don't vote on all of these variances at once. Take them individually, go down through. You might think that, well, they're entitled to a density variance. We don't care how big the apartments are inside, but if you allow them to put that building 10 feet from our property instead of 75 feet, that's a substantial problem for us. 81B, if you haven't read it in a while, it says you must grant the minimum variance necessary and adequate, and at the same time preserve and protect the character of the neighborhood and the health, safety, welfare of the community. And just like SECRA, 81B allows you to impose conditions to minimize any adverse impact such variances may have on the neighborhood, which gives you all sorts of authority to impose conditions and not just rubber stamp this application. So you weigh the benefit to the applicant, LMP, not the temple, against the detriment to the health, safety, and welfare of this low-density, mid-rise neighborhood with 4 historic properties. Now I'll go quickly through the variance criteria. The first area variance criterion has 2 parts. It is whether an undesirable change will be produced in the character of the neighborhood or a detriment to nearby properties will be created by the granting of the area variance. The first part, I'm not even going to take on. Whether the project would create an undesirable change in the character of the neighborhood may be debatable. But there's an or there, not an and. Or a detriment to nearby properties. And whether granting these variances would create a detriment to nearby properties like my clients and Ms. Liebling's is not debatable. Putting this tall a building only 10 feet from Sherbrooke's property would of course be a detriment to our property. That's why the zoning law says it should be over 75 feet. For starters, it would block light and air to our building and Madison Court. It would interfere with firefighting access to the rear of our building, and it would infringe on our easement, which extends onto the temple property. Those aren't opinion. Those are empirical fact, and they're exactly the type of detriments that the area variance criteria are supposed to get to. So the first area variance criterion comes down convincingly against the granting of the variance. The second criterion is whether the benefits sought by the applicant can be achieved by some method feasible for the applicant to pursue other than an area variance. And we understand the benefit LMP seeks is to build the largest residential project possible. LMP has never established that they couldn't construct a project that complies with your zoning law, or at least comes within binocular range of it. Unfortunately, an alternative that met the zoning law wasn't even analyzed in the alternative section of the DEIS. Why have an alternative section of the DEIS if you're not going to at least look at a project that meets the zoning law? Well, they successfully avoided doing that. So the second criterion is close, but we think it tips against granting the variance. The third criterion is whether the requested area variance is substantial. And each of these variances is demonstrably substantial. The side yard variance Ms. Liebling is looking at is 100% of the standard. The rear yard, 86% of the standard. Lot coverage, 72%. And the density, 57%. 100% of anything is everything. If a company has 86% of a market share, it's significant. If you can increase a portfolio by 72%, that's substantial. And if a candidate garners 57% of the vote, that's substantial. Each of these variances is objectively and empirically substantial. And this criterion comes down squarely against granting the variance. The fourth criterion, and I'm almost done, Mr. Chairman, is whether the proposed variance will have an adverse effect or impact on the physical or environmental conditions in the neighborhood or district. And you already answered this question when you issued a positive declaration and found that the project would have the potential for significant adverse effects on the environment. Now, the secret findings get at whether the project is one that avoids or minimizes impacts to the maximum extent practicable. But this area variance criterion only asks whether there will be an adverse effect or impact on the physical and environmental conditions, not whether they've been avoided or mitigated. And I'm not sure anybody can credibly argue that allowing this building to be built so much larger and denser than the city zoning law requires would not have an adverse effect on the physical conditions of the neighborhood. It certainly would, particularly in terms of shadows, traffic, and congestion. So the fourth criterion comes down against the granting of the variances. And the fifth and final criterion is, of course, whether the alleged difficulty was self-created. And in plain English, that means, did they agree to buy the property with knowledge of the zoning restrictions? And the city zoning law was on the books long before this project was ever a twinkle in LMP's eye. So LMP's hardship is indisputably self-created, and the fifth criterion comes down hard against granting the variances. And if you're keeping score, that's 0 and 5. To conclude, the variances would create an obvious detriment to my clients and other adjacent properties just from the shadows. And those shadow drawings are in the EIS. Please make sure you look at them. And we don't know that LMP couldn't build a project that complies with, or at least comes closer to, the zoning law, because you've never been provided any information about that. Each of the variances is substantial. I don't need to go through the numbers again. The shadows and from the side and rear yard variances would have effects on the physical conditions of the neighborhood, which, as you heard, now enjoys much light and little shadow. And LMP's hardship is 100% textbook self-created. All 5 variance criteria come down against granting the variances. Not one points strongly in LMP's favor. Not one. And when that happens, the detriment to the health, safety, and welfare of the neighborhood and community outweighs the benefit to the applicant. That's why if you were to grant the variance, you'd have to close your eyes, cover your ears, and hold your nose. A law is a law, and the zoning law ought to be applied and enforced uniformly. You're the safety valve in the case of hardship or difficulty, and you have the power to vary the zoning law. That's an awesome power, and you should use that power sparingly and judiciously, and only when there's real hardship or difficulty. There's no real hardship or difficulty here, just a developer that goes big or goes home. They exactly knew what the zoning restrictions are. They didn't think that you'd hold them to them, and they still don't. You don't have to give away the neighborhood store. You can apply the law. The sanctuary isn't going anywhere. They're still working on the Acropolis, the Pantheon, and Notre Dame, for God's sake. The record here clearly supports denial. We're confident that the remaining members of the board are able to exercise their independent and reasonable judgment and make a rational decision based on the record before you, not on the supposed popularity of the project. Please deny the egregious rear yard variance. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to speak against the application? Okay, I allow the applicant to make a statement.
Thank you. Brian Bouchard with CHA Consulting, project engineer working on behalf of the applicant. I did...
Give us an address, please.
300 South State Street. Thank you. Obviously, I think, much like a lot of things, you can hear the same information from two sides and it's explained differently. To put a little context to the rear yard variance that Doug was just talking about, this property is unique in that it has a front, a side, and a rear. Although it is a corner lot, the front is the shortest side of the lot facing University Ave. So the side yard that we're requesting is actually the Madison Street frontage. Required 10 feet, and we're asking for 0 feet so that the building can approach the road just like the other buildings that are along the street. The rear yard that he's referring to, because it is a corner lot, doesn't truly have a rear yard, but it is defined as a rear yard. And that rear yard definition is based on the building height and a minimum setback, totaling just over 75 feet. Our building will be placed 10 feet from the property line. This is the common property line that's shared with Sherbrooke Apartments, as he mentioned, and Sherbrooke Apartments building is between 3 and 5 feet from the similar property line. So our building has, in fact, been separated further from the property line than the existing Sherbrooke is. Some of the other topics that we talked about, with respect to height and massing, and your counterpart had asked, what we had added specifically to the final EIS in terms of that. And one of the pieces and comments and responses in section 9, we actually added a graphic, which is an aerial view of this, the multiple city blocks that surround this project. And what we did is labeled the building heights that are proximate to the project. Some of these include obviously the directly adjacent Sherbrooke Apartments. We're requesting a 7-story building, which is actually 6 stories on the backside because it's partially built into the hillside, but the frontage along Madison is 6 stories. Sherbrooke Apartments is 5 stories with an occupied attic, and you'll find on that response to that comment, the difference in elevation between the ridge of Sherbrooke and the proposed apartment project is only 22 feet. Madison Court is obviously across the street is 3 stories, and you'll find a description there that it's 3 stories, but because it was a school, obviously has fairly substantial floor-to-floor heights. 1 block to the south is the University Ave garage, which is visible from our project as a 5 to 6 story parking garage. Schuyler Commons, which is around the corner, but again 1 block away, it's not visible from the project, but is a 5-story student housing project. McCarthy Manor is 1 block to the west on Madison. If you were at the door front of McCarthy Manor, you'd be able to see the Temple Concord and the sanctuary from the site, and that's an 8-story residential apartment building. Directly across the street from it is a 7-story parking garage, also visible from the project site. Other projects similar to this that are more recent construction include 505 Walnut, which is 1 block to the east and north, which is described in our materials. It's a 6-story student housing project. U Point Syracuse is directly down the street right next to Grace Church. It's a 6-story student housing project that was developed very recently. So contextually, when we ask you to look and start to develop findings, it's not just this city block, right? That what we're describing is the neighborhood and what has changed over the neighborhood, and the fact that this project exists on the connective corridor. There's the intent of the city to spur economic development within the corridor, which is also described within the Comprehensive Plan 2040 under its goals and recommendations for economic development, which states to facilitate higher residential density along the neighborhood business corridors and to support and encourage high density residential projects on the upper floors of corridor buildings adjacent to properties, on properties adjacent to commercial corridors to promote foot traffic, et cetera, and viability. And this may call for zoning changes as well as selectively incentivizing residential projects when market conditions do not. That's the adopted plan. We obviously know that Rezone Syracuse has been a thought process for many years, kind of culminating in the final draft from 2019. This project is within the MX4 district that the city contemplates as being established, quote, to provide for pedestrian-friendly, transit-supported areas of high-density residential development. So although the zoning code is antiquated, we can say to you that some of the more recent documents, including the adopted comprehensive plan, is very applicable to this project. And that is why some of these other more recent construction projects that are very similar to this have been approved with very similar variances. And we compare a lot of those projects when some of the others had talked about comparisons of what you consider to be like the mass and scale of the variances themselves. We've given you examples of what this board has approved and what the city has approved based on the transformation that is occurring within the neighborhood. As you start to develop your findings, section 3 is where we went through the the identification of historic resources and the potential impacts and mitigation measures and what we have changed of the project throughout time. This included reducing a full story, which was previously an 8-story building and is now a 7-story building, to more closely match the height of the buildings in the area that I described. And also other changes that when we initially had met with Syracuse Landmark Preservation Board were asked of us, such as pulling back the southerly wing of the building and losing units so that the visibility of the temple sanctuary could be maintained within the sight lines along the street frontages. So with that, obviously, a lot of the other documents are in hand, but I wanted to point you to some of those specific sections.
Okay, thank you very much. So we're not voting till next time, and we have to review the seeker statement.
But we may be closing the hearing.
Yes, but what I want to ask is there a reason to have a discussion now? Or should we wait until we review the seeker and then come back as we usually do?
We can wait until we have a motion, then we can discuss.
Okay. Well, I understand that, but what I'm asking is, should I entertain a motion now to delay this till the next?
So the question is, do you want to close the public hearing?
Yes.
Yeah, I think if there's no one else that
yes,
wishes
you
to
wanna-
comment,
yes,
you should
okay,
close the
that's
public
fine.
hearing. Yeah. So,
So-
just confirming.
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah,
I'll make a motion to close the hearing.
Well, we don't need a motion, we just.
you do,
close.
yeah. Yeah, you can move to close the
Not a-
public hearing.
It's not one of our regulars, it's part of the seeker hearing.
Okay, fine. Is there a second?
I will second.
Okay, any discussion? All those in favor of close?
No, this discussion is just to close the public
Yes,
hearing.
uh-huh.
Okay. And then we'll be able to comment afterwards, Stu?
That we'll discuss next.
Well, we're looking to do the vote at the next meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not looking to vote, but I'm looking to comment on what
We have a motion, so you could discuss it. Sure.
I could do that now? Or
I prefer it be about this motion and not,
Not the larger project.
not the larger project.
okay?
So why don't we just vote? Motion to close the hearing, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Do we want to entertain any other motions? Now, do we want to have a discussion?
Well, what I would like to do is distribute to the board a draft of the proposed findings. So, as it was alluded to before, this board doesn't have executive session. So we've never discussed as a group this project outside of a public hearing. What I have done, because we need to start somewhere on these written findings, is I've contacted board members individually to get some guidance as to what they want to see in a draft of proposed seeker findings. So, and I've talked to nearly all of you, all but one. What I'd like to do now, with the permission of the chair, is to distribute a draft proposed finding statement for seeker. This is not a decision about which way you're going to go on the variance, one way or the other, but this is a proposed seeker finding statement. If that's acceptable to the chair, that I distribute this, what I would ask you to do is read it, comment on it, let me know if you want changes ahead of the next meeting, and then I can make adjustments and you can debate it and vote on it at the next meeting. That way you have a chance to, in a deliberative way, read it, study it, consider the comments you've heard, and make the adjustments you want to make. everybody I spoke to said before they wanted to receive any sort of formal statement, they wanted to hear what was said in the public hearing.
Could I ask staff to just send an email to us, kind of reminding us that maybe we set a date to have comments by?
Back to me, yeah. If you get to me a couple days before the meeting, I can make amendments, it's fine. Yeah. So is that all right if I distribute this?
Absolutely. Okay. What's the date of our next meeting, Lisa?
October 29th.
I don't know. That's right.
Saturday.
Thank you.
October
27th.
27th.
Probably 3 weeks from today on that. So our plan will be, as you've heard, to take this up at the next meeting, hopefully make a decision. That's it. Okay.
Yep, if you agree with that suggested approach, then you're done with this application for today.
Okay, thank you. No new cases for next time, I see, or did I miss them? Okay. Okay, motion to adjourn. Second. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Good time.